our friends, for all the friends in the region, including governments and people, the challenge is to help our partners take systematic steps to usher in a better future where people's voices are heard, their rights respected, and their aspirations met.
It's suggested American officials are trying to do a deal to bring this crisis to an end. Egypt's new Vice President, Omar Suleiman, has been meeting opposition figures. He's likely to tell them the president is going nowhere just now. And so finding a solution to this crisis becomes much more difficult. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's go to international reaction on this, because the issue of Egypt's become a key talking point at a high-level security conference in Munich in Germany. This was something that was already planned, but, and Tim Friend can tell us about this now, Egypt's gone right to the top of the agenda, and Hillary Clinton's come out with some of the strongest language we've heard.
She has indeed, and as Alan Fisher's story reflected there, it was pretty strong stuff. She broadened out the argument to include the whole region. She said that if other regional leaders think they can resist change, they should think again. And she said if this week proved anything, then it was that those who kept the door closed on the advance of democracy would reap a whirlwind. I think this was probably pretty much a landmark speech from her. She's clearly chosen this opportunity to make Washington's position known beyond the arguments about how quickly President Mubarak should go. There's no doubt amongst all the delegates here, all the world leaders here, and the UN and the European Union, that that moment will come sooner or later. And I think the impetus that the demonstrators have given this whole argument has bounced over to Europe, and they're picking it up and advancing the discussion now in terms of who will replace him and how we can ensure that smooth transition. It's become something of a mantra here, this attempt to ensure what they're describing as a smooth transition to democracy in Egypt.
Yeah, on that note, actually, Tim, let's have a listen to what Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, has said.
It is of vital importance to uphold the freedoms that we consider universal, like freedom of press, freedom of opinion, freedom of independent journalism, not only in Europe or America, but also in Egypt. Yesterday was relatively peaceful, and we hope it was a sign and will continue. There will be a change in Egypt, but it must be formed in a way that it will be peaceful and sensible.
You know what strikes me, Tim, when you hear what Chancellor Merkel just said, what Secretary of State Clinton said, is the fact that they now can come out and say these things. They can put their neck on the line and say these things now, when a lot of people would think they should have said them earlier, but because there's a popular uprising, they're almost riding on the wave of that.
They are indeed, and they might not have said these things even a week ago. In fact, the European Union was happily doing business with President Mubarak up to a few days ago. And this has been the main criticism. While they were thinking there was a nice, stable regime that was all right to do business with, clearly all this discontent was bubbling, and they didn't really latch onto that mood quickly enough. I'm sure people were aware, of course, but perhaps they should have acted in a more decisive way. And interesting hearing Angela Merkel, of course, hearing about all that, especially here in speaking about all that, especially here in Germany. She is from the old East Germany, of course. A lot of people are comparing Europe's Berlin Wall moment, when, of course, the collapse of communism ensued. There was a whole sea change in the political makeup of Europe, and some seasoned observers here are drawing parallels now with certain bits of the Middle East. Whether that's a comparison too far, of course, still remains to be seen. But Angela Merkel is someone who's been through those changes herself.
Thank you, Tim. Tim Friend, live for us at that International Security Conference in Munich. These, the live pictures from Liberation Square in Cairo, Tahrir Square, as the crowds start to swell once again. Not up to the numbers they were in the real fervour and euphoria of Friday. On a bit of a lull, you might say, in things at the moment as the people gather there, listen to speeches being made. One of our correspondents on the line now who, as we continue to say, not naming for their own safety. What are you seeing today as far as numbers and interest on the street, I guess?
Well, what we're seeing to a large extent on the streets of Cairo on Saturday is an attempt by many ordinary Egyptians to resume something approaching a normal life. We're actually starting to see quite a lot of traffic on the streets again. But still, it's not possible for drivers or vehicles at all to get access to the area around Tahrir Square. I mean, that is...
All right, sounds like we've lost communications, unfortunately, there with our correspondent on the line. But from what we heard of it, they're saying that things are starting not necessarily to return to normal, but traffic is moving a little bit more. Certainly access is blocked, and we've got a map, actually, of Cairo, which we can show you just to give you an idea. For those of you not familiar with the geography of Cairo, we can have a look at this map, I hope. There it comes. Flies down into the capital. And have a look. This is Liberation Square there, on the very, very close to the Nile. Those access points, 6th of October Bridge, where we saw so much of the original fighting, the Qasr al-Nile Bridge as well, which accesses through there, and then the Egyptian Museum close by as well. This is all the areas, the lines, the arteries which feed Liberation Square, and which brought the people there. And little we heard of our correspondent there saying that perhaps things are starting, there is a little bit more of movement on some of those bridges and access points again. It's taking them all there to Liberation Square. As we say, just compared to the real euphoria and fervour of yesterday, this is a lot more subdued. But another correspondent I spoke to earlier was saying don't necessarily read that as a lack of interest or that the movement is losing momentum. It still very much has momentum. And remember, it's not just Liberation Square where these things happen. It's all over the city. But certainly the numbers are down on yesterday. Well, let's look at another event that's happened in Egypt. It happened in the North Sinai Peninsula region. An explosion at a gas terminal. A blast which set off this massive fire that could be seen from kilometres away. This was taken from Gaza, these pictures. 10 kilometres away, you see the huge fireball in the sky. What's crucial is that this terminal supplies several countries in the region. One of them is Jordan. And there has been word from Jordan that supplies are going to be cut there for quite a period of time. We've got Nisreen El-Shumaila, our correspondent live in Amman, to talk through this. Nisreen, what's the damage basically as far as Jordan is concerned?
Well, basically what we've heard from the National Electricity Company, and not from government officials per se, but it is a government company, a government-owned company, is that power plants in Jordan are now having to operate on burning fuel oil and diesel because Egypt has stopped supplying Jordan with gas and has promised the Jordanian side to repair the rupture and the pipelines within a week. Now, I spoke to the managing director at this electricity company, and he told me hopefully this will happen in less than a week, and that the situation is manageable and it's under control. He's saying this in order to avoid any kind of panic. The Jordanian government has announced a couple of weeks ago a package including tax cuts on some kinds of fuel derivatives, and has promised not to raise prices, even though international prices are rising, not to raise prices of fuel derivatives till March, till the end of March. Now, this burning of fuel and diesel to supply the country with electricity that relies on Egyptian gas to satisfy 80% of its needs, this is likely to cost Jordan over $4 million per day. Right now, these power plants have reserves of fuel oil and diesel that would last Jordan for about 3 weeks, but they say the situation is manageable and that the pipeline will be repaired in less than a week.
But it brings into sharp focus as well, doesn't it, Nisreen, the importance of Egypt to Jordan. We generally, when we talk about Middle Eastern energy supplies, the focus is on the Israeli-Egyptian relationship. Jordan's got potentially more at stake.
Absolutely. Jordan's very resource poor. We rely on imports for all fuel derivatives. As I mentioned, Jordan relies on Egyptian gas imports for 80% of its electricity needs. And this is may very well be a precarious situation for Jordan. It's already suffering a large budget deficit. And that's what has pushed Jordanians, who have actually had to deal with severe economic hardships due to this large budget deficit, to take to the streets and to demonstrate. And we've seen the Jordanian leadership respond to some of these demands by appointing a new prime minister and promising major political and economic reforms in order to maintain the status quo and the stability in the country. But as we've seen what's happening in Egypt, this unrest is directly affecting Jordan.